There we go. Everything's up and live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 552. I'm your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday at the end of February. And if you're watching our simulcast that we do every Wednesday morning, 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time, or London time, thank you to our APAC, EU, and Mideast friends for listening to us. I did get corrected by one of my listeners that when I say EU, it's actually a political collective. It's not actually a geographical reference, as I do with everyone else. So they said, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, but we do get listenership out of all of them. We're in 209 countries with the TV show. So I should say Europe. But then again, you have Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Nordic, any which ways. I will probably mistakenly say EU every once in a while, but I will try to refer to the European continent specifically. Mideast, again, collectively, not necessarily individually, but it does span a region of. And to be fair, and I had a comment made from South Africa that I don't often include that very large continent in my reference to people that do listen and watch. And we do have those that are in South Africa in particular that do watch and listen to the show. And thank you so very much for that. And I certainly by no means want to be exclusionary in any of this. So with that, thank you to everybody in the 209 countries that we broadcast to for listening and watching to our show, both live, which is always amazing given the time zone variations that I have listeners and viewerships that are going on. And of course, the replays that are present throughout the time until the next show next week. So thank you all so very much. And of course, everyone that watches us simulcasted on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. Thank you so much for all of that as well. I find myself popping up in Reddit feeds as well, which is pretty cool. So thank you, everyone, for your continued interest and engagement and contents and suggestions and so forth, to which end our topic today is very relevant to ongoing discussions that we have in our Hospitality Marketing Club, which if you're a hospitality marketer, you're more than welcome to join. Go to hospitalitymarketing.club. You'll see it there. You can join that if you're a hospitality marketer. AI. It is a persistent dialogue. It's ever present in conversations. It's persistently asked about. It's persistently addressed. It's persistently struggled with. Sometimes reveals, sometimes ahas, sometimes what the hex. But AI is a persistent dialogue with what we are using it for, could use it for, have used it for. Pardon me. So, all that is live. I don't edit things. So. AI in this circumstance is grown into a conversation as to the value proposition of augmentation or replacement. Now we see in the news persistently large organizations like Amazon and others that are saying we're cutting these many in our workforce because AI has replaced their functionality to this. And there is some logistics value to that in the sense of the automation of the bots, the lack of the need of physical presence of certain things can be automated. There are certain processes that are being automated, but the question really comes up out of that dialogue. Replacement or augmentation, is it really good to replace a real person with an AI solution? So our topic today, why AI will never challenge creative marketing. And it's been a lively conversation that we've had on the Marketing Club as to the pros and cons of making that kind of statement. So let's back into a little bit of what the influencing factors are associated with why I make the statement that AI will never challenge creative marketing. So for those that are familiar with how AI functions in the sense of what does it do, there was a fascinating article that will be in the show notes from Philip Dubois about the mathematics associated with AI. For those that are unfamiliar with some of the aspects of AI basically looks on what's called the mathematics of next token prediction, which is what is the most statistically probable continuation of a sequence. So if something is happening, it perceives pattern, relationship between, and so what would be the most logically probable, statistically probable continuation? As some of my friends, Aaron Bennett and so forth, point out, it goes word to word. What's the next probable word, in essence, if you want to think of it in a more myopic way, myopic not being bad, is that what would be the next word after that word? And the key element to this thought process is probability. Because probability by definition means average. So the model, okay, the LLM model is not trying to produce the best output. It's producing the most expected one. What is the most aggregate mean in the middle, most common, acceptable value that it would identify, which means that the outlier qualities, the extreme not probables and the extreme incredibly possible, rarely possible architecture, it doesn't really gather that, okay? It doesn't take those aspects, the outliers, as much value to its mathematical model as it does the most probable answer, which is usually lumped and clumped in the mean. You think of that old bell curve that you used to have. Think back in school, the bell curve of, were you on the fringes or were you in the middle of, most everybody else? And of course, the people that did exceptionally well dragged the bell curve over, which made it harder for people to score their grades better because somebody made it harder for them, versus if everybody did poor consistently, it was easier to score a better score because less people achieve beyond the mean. I hope that made sense to you when I talked about it. So the idea of this is that AI is actually beginning to cascade on itself problems of average mean value responses, average most acceptable content. It's looking for the most probable, which means most volumically relevant to what it's trying to do, compared to the improbable, which is really the learning aspects. It's the intangibilities at the tail ends of those. So the model can eventually collapse on itself, because this is something I actually didn't know. It was brought to my attention to this, as to when you give AI, ChatGPT or Perplexity, any of those, and you give them a PDF document, and you say, summarize this document. And it'll summarize the document. And it makes sense to you. It's great. It can point out whatever. If you don't, then you can clarify some of the summarization if you already knew the content of the document, which and make me find what it answers to you for. Moving forward, AI doesn't keep the original document that it reviewed. It takes its summary, and that is now collectively available for its reuse again. So in the old world, of one of analogies I've used for many years, for those old enough to remember Xerox, the copying company that's turned synonymous with making copies, was I have had a term called Xerox training. And I got that from Bonnie Buchheiser when we were on our HSMAI Rocket Tour. She referred to this as Xerox training, where when somebody learned something, they learned about 40% of what they learned. And when they taught somebody, they were only using the 40% they learned to teach that person. Well, if that person only has 40%, then they're fractionally less than what they cumulatively could have had, and so on and so on. So what you end up getting is a very blurry copy, much like the old mimeograph machines. Xerox is just a monicum. Of when you used a copy of a copy, it wasn't as crisp and clear as the original being used. In AI, the original content is not brought forward, the summary is. So that if the summary gets used again, whatever inconsistencies, incongruities, hallucinations that were implied from the summary, which there are, then gets taken as base for the next summary, which does its own variation of that. And that gets used as base for the next summary. So what ends up happening is like a game of telephone, which is an old game. We're talking about old stuff today, where you get a line of people and one person will go over and say something to the first person, and then that person was supposed to repeat it to the next person secretly, quietly. And at the very end, the fun was to see what the eventual message was from the original message and how totally dysfunctional it became. That's what happens with this content. So as you have AI do things that require, for lack of a better term for it, creativity, what you're finding is it's taking the most aggregate, acceptable, average probability of what should be done in the middle. None of the outliers of the things are actually being used in that resultant. Now, I say that, and there's always exceptions where there are AIs that are purposely looking for off-mean values and so forth, but that's because it's a derived function and it's very particular to the depth of research you do, different branch of conversation. But in all honesty, our generalized use of AI and how AI gets used in our industry is very much this probability of average value. What is the most acceptable context of what we're putting. So what you're creating is an homogeny, just a generalized, this is the most popular, this is the most frequently asked answered, this is the most common understanding of it, and that's what gets used by AI. That gets generated, that gets used again by another AI or your same AI, and that dilution begins from that point forward. That is the antithesis of creativity. Creativity is about finding the divine spark of interest or idea that is not common, hence everybody's not doing it, and that you are, which creates its own value. That ad that just resonates, that post that just creates engagement. Those things are on the fringes of what AI does and doesn't do, really. And that is that spark of things. So let's take this into a real world example. If you have AI creating your ads and you've taken out the human portion of this, you're like, I'm going to use PMax and it's going to make my ads for me. It's going to look for all of the things that are most engaged with, the images that are most popular, the content that seems to resonate with purchases and so forth. And we over the show have shown many times over, PMax goes off the reservation when it comes to coming up with things that aren't real and or aren't the highlight, or worse yet, they find your competitor because of how you told them to go fetch what you were wanting them to do in the case of additional revenue. And they look for the best converting things and they're not yours, but they find it elsewhere. And they begin to use those links in the ad campaigns that you're paying them to create for you. We've seen this happen many times. Has it gotten better? Absolutely. I mean, Google is progressively and persistently trying to improve that functionality. Metasearch, I believe, is still stumbling over itself dramatically over many, many things because it's trying to figure out the weighted value between these common, popular way of understanding things and how they interrelate for making decisions. But by the same token, I see that it's never going to fix itself until it begins to include more than the probability factor, because it's that outlying creativity, the not normal functions, okay, that are the divine spark of creative marketing. So taking the human out and having AI do this is one thing. That's replacement. And it can go south and it goes bad. And a lot of companies in their desire to cut costs see this, oh, this is a perfect solution. We no longer have to pay these people or this agency or have that team internally to do these things. We have AI to simply say, go fetch, go do this, take whatever you need out of the data that we have and go do all these things. Without anybody watching it, it'll go and end up beginning to distort itself. Because there is a very real thing about AI, and that is hallucinations. Because of this commonality, popularity, because they see similarities of same content, they envision that there's a reality to them. Remember that whole dilution of content as things get used over and over by AI and the original doesn't get kept? Well, it begins to construct references to things that may not actually exist. They may talk about your pool that you don't have, the tennis courts you don't have, the rooms that you don't have, the proximity to events that you aren't. Because as it sees information, but it doesn't weigh that information accurately, it begins to say that that's the probability of knowledge, and therefore turns it into the middle, turns into higher value, gets used in another context, next thing you know is hallucinates. To give you a sense of this, there's two, in this article that the Philip Buck one that talks about the concaving of AI's mathematics, is the fact that there are two fields and a generative third that you should not rely upon AI as the authority. One is finance. You would think mathematically probabilities, returns, results, values, appreciation, so forth, that would be an AI field day. Like, okay, this is all cause and effect kind of stuff to a certain degree. So AI should do really well. It doesn't. It does poorly. I'm not going to go down to 10. It does poorly. The other is when it comes to legal. When AI was first beginning to get used for creating briefs and or doing research, it was pointed out that on average, there would have been, for its usage, approximately 3 hallucinations, 3 incorrect case studies that it generated to solve a question that was asked of it that didn't exist a week. Now it's more than that a day. And I'm thinking about single reference when they were talking about single firms usage reference, not cumulative in the globe. That would be a very minor fractional number. This is how it multiplies just for a single user. That's a problem because now it's going to try to influence the law. But what happens is if nobody checks it or nobody sees these things, then it can go out of hand. And we've seen it in some of the news. Some law firms are in a lot of trouble for putting together briefs that are based on literally nothing accurate. And the third, which is of great concern, but it's a pivot point to what I want to talk about, is medical. We've seen in the news over and over the discoveries of AI, of seeing things because it has the ability to look at much larger masses of data than a human can keep up with individually. And it discovers patterns or things that humans have yet to discover because they don't see enough of them, or if they do, they don't keep remembering that they saw it enough to begin to think that why that might be some medical thing there. And AI can do this, and that's great, but not left alone because there's a lot of false positives. There's a lot of false negatives because that average mean value that it's referring to, that cumulative next best word, the next most probably statistically relevant answer that drives it, creates an inherent error factor to it, which means that it's better suited to be monitored with a human, where it works in collaboration with a human. Because taking the medical example, and I'm getting to bring this back to our marketing example, by the way, is the understanding that I know I can't see all of this, and AI is good at seeing all of this, but once it discovers something that it finds relevant, I, as a human, should look at that and determine the relevancy accuracy. How, based on what it's discovered, is that true or not true, real or not real? And from that, determine, should this be used? That goes hand in hand with our marketing. When we use AI to augment what we're doing, trends, patterns, performances, things that we need understanding of all this voluminous data that we're being given. And I refer to GA4 in particular when I say that. There's so many ways of looking at the data, so many algorithms of determining just even attribution. How do you want to determine it? We built for a client of ours comparison of different attributions: first click, last click, linear, frequency, decay, to show how the same traffic and transactions changed as to how they were accounted for the channels that contributed to them and the conversion values of those channels. And all of them were different. Some were closer to each other based on what they were, but all of them showed different things. Not all of them weren't wrong, and all of them weren't right. All of them had something to say. Just even looking at that comparisons, it's always challenging to draw your conclusions. How many times have you been in a meeting and spreadsheets get tossed around or thrown up on a screen or something like this, and you're scrambling to look for the relevance of the numbers? What does that mean? I love when guys go, or girls, anybody goes up and says, so what does this tell you? And you're sitting there going, okay, this is the first time I'm seeing this, and I'm supposed to be the smartest one to say, oh, well, I see that correlation there. Some things do stand out, but that's often a pit of, why don't you tell me why you put the slide up, and I'll tell you whether I think it's right or wrong. A little easier. Let's get to the chase rather than me trying to scramble to act like I'm smarter than, you popping it up and than me for looking at it for the first time. Always aggravated me when people did that. As you can tell, the ability to see in the numbers what those say. As I've referred to many times before, 95% of the people that look at analytics data in our industry look for simple numbers. How many people could we've gotten to? How many people actually engaged with? Some people actually clicked through us, and how many people actually converted? That beautiful funnel process. Which channels did they use? Break it down a little bit more, so forth and so on. And that's about it. Now, there have been greater creative ways of showing that graphically, visually, so forth, to show color patterns and heat charts and, pies versus spaghettis and all this other stuff that goes on with it, or some modality model. We're always in ways of trying to show how the data can be better understood. But 95% of the people just really have this perfunctory look at the numbers to understand, we're doing good, we're doing bad. Is there something I need to be doing differently just from what I can discover this way? Because there's other people that look at this more. They're going to tell me if I need to be worried about something. And that's the next 4% of the people. The next 4% of the people are a little bit more in depth of, okay, so we see this. What caused these things to be this? What campaigns did this? What messages did this? What content did this? And then you have the 1% people who are really the grinders, which are the ones that are building the system to represent this kind of data. Can we pull this and make it compare to this? What numbers relate to this that we want to put together, so forth and so on. Through that whole process, it's all about explaining the discovery of the data. It's not the prescriptive value of what to do with it. It's just simply the explaining of the data that we have. And as I mentioned with the attribution contrast, how that gets interpreted is really into the hands of the presenter. As what is it? The joke is 84% of all statistics are made up on the spot. It's true. And what we find, and you've heard me complain about this, is many times those numbers are manipulated to the benefit of the presenter. Stories in the storyteller. If I'm the vendor sharing with you what we've been doing, I'm going to shift the numbers around a bit to reflect that I'm doing well. I'm not saying I do this. Actually, I do the contrary of it. But there's so many vendors that are like, this month's report's going to highlight our traffic numbers because last month we had better conversion, so we wanted to highlight the conversion. But this month our conversion isn't as good, so let's highlight the traffic numbers having gone up. They do that incessantly, and unless you're understanding how those numbers work, you're sitting in the meeting, waiting for the next meeting, hoping that this meeting ends soon enough because you're not really the one that's had to make a decision. And you're looking at it going, okay, yeah, that many people, great, yeah, okay. Because it's not maybe your sandbox, or you don't want to be the one that asks the silly question, hey, I have no idea why you're referring to different numbers than you did last month, because you don't feel strong enough in your knowledge of it not to be shut down with somebody embarrassing you with we talked about this, Lauren. The politics of it is always absurd to me. So anyways, AI and creative and why that won't replace. Through this whole process of determining prescriptive modeling, you're wanting to understand what it is you're looking at to know what it is you need to do about it. And from that, you know that you have to be very good at the messaging you do. Now, if you rely upon AI and replace people, then AI is going to come up with whatever it needs, accurate or not. If you augment people with AI, then it can handle the volume of the things that people can't, that little tangent we just went down on data, to better understand what you need to be creative about. And then AI can help with answering some questions directly related to usability, which image is the most popular image that's on our page, so forth and so on, and it tells you. And you can see, okay, well, what makes that picture popular? Well, when has it been popular? It was popular during the summer. Well, it makes sense because the picture is about a pool. Wintertime, it was more about the golfing because people were seeing open, non-snowy spaces or something. There's ways for you to creatively interpret what it is that you need for content, but the creativity isn't about the average mean value. That has value, but it's about the ability to understand the nuances that can invoke the creative spark that is that unique thing that draws attention that's not just statistically relevant. So AI augmentation is much more beneficial than AI replacement. In the article link, and I'm referring this article, it was a great article strongly putting out, showing good math and showing good surveys. It wasn't just an opinion piece, it was actually a factual piece on the survey. Is the surveys massively large and super conclusive? No, but it's indicative. Indicative data usually means that you can at least point in a certain direction and look more in that direction than all the other choices you had before. So this indicative data lets us say, well, what does this mean? Well, it means that if we use AI to augment human engagement, their performance improves very well. I mean, there's numbers that they gives, and I'm not going to try to cite numbers for, but in great percentages that your efficiency, quality, and accuracy improve with the augmentation of AI, where the replacement with AI creates a negative impact even larger, where you actually mess things up. Now, here's the other part. Any company that has been doing this, if you've gutted your personnel and allowed AI to dominate without it being checked, or worse yet, you have AI running it, but a non-marketing person is controlling it, then they have no sense of whether or not the numbers are relevant to its success or failure other than the positives or the negatives. They have no idea what would be wrong enough to fix it. They don't know what's wrong, let alone to fix it. And that's where you run into the problem that now all of a sudden, wait a minute, we made a mistake. We're really not doing as well as we used to do. This cost savings of going to AI has really degenerated our revenue growth. So we need to bring somebody back, but we don't want to bring somebody who's too expensive. So let's bring a newbie and bring them back. If you bring in somebody that has yet to have the ability of free thought, independent thinking, into supervising platforms that are doing all of these things, they will believe the platform because they don't have a knowledge base enough of themselves to know what is good or bad in comparison to the platform. So for that reason, you're not fixing the problem, you're exacerbating the problem, because now you think that, well, I put a human back in control of that. They're a marketing person, granted a new marketing person. They have no idea what they're doing in hospitality, but we're not just letting the AI run itself. All you've done is add gas to the fire, because now you're getting affirmational function to a broken function that you're trying to fix. That's where the danger lies in this attrition of good, talented, creative marketers, is if you replace them with just the functionality of AI, you create and exacerbate this problem, because AI, as we mentioned early on, goes to the average probable mean in the middle. What is the most probable consensus, the statistically most relevant action that happens from this next thing I have to do to answer this question? What you need to look at for creative marketing is you have to have creative people. The really cool part, and I'll say it from a first person context of music. So I don't know, but then there is a very divided world about this, about AI generated music. There are those that despise it. They condemn it as not being music. They have definitions that a musician is supposed to be someone that can read and write sheet music and play instruments. And I completely agree with them. That is a musician. But there's a lot of, and then there's the other side, people that enjoy the AI created music because it gives them a creative venue that they never had before. And I'll say that I'm on that side of the camp for it, where I can't play an instrument. And even when I tried playing an instrument in high school, I was not really good at it. I certainly can't write music, although I love adapting lyrics, or, I have ideas of, I would love a song for that reason or something like this. But AI music allows you a venue to be creative and create your own music. And you modify and write your lyrics, and you change and modify your lyrics. And AI helps you with those lyrics. It creates the harmony, the hooks and so forth, and you modify them to what you want. Recreate the sound tone. You have to be very definitive of what you want for music. Anyway, not to go down the rabbit hole too far, but it gives me a chance to be creatively expressive in a way that I can't physically do. I can't play the guitar or the piano or anything else that would augment what I could do to create a song. But I enjoy creating interesting music for things that I enjoy, and variations and so forth. So with that in mind, creative people can use AI, as my example, to be more creative, because where they may have been limited before in a mock-up of an idea, they can now mock up the idea and see if they still like it as much as they were thinking they were going to like it. Or they can mock up a video snip to see if that's actually visually what they want, or audibly what they want, or written content what they want, variations to what they want. They can create what they think, okay, and then expand it to how others think about it by asking AI to optically look at and change, if they were such and such type of persona, how they would read this ad. One of the fun, insightful things to try, if you would be interested, is once you write copy for an ad, just the copy, not the image, not the video, just the copy. And you can do it for the other two as well, is then have AI, and not just one AI. I use a thing called Chat Playground, which allows me to do up to 8 AI engines on LM models on a single query, is to put the ad out, describe what the ad is intended for, and read and give feedback as if you were XYZ demographic. And it will give you a response factor saying, this has no relevance to me. It was a start. I thought I had written a great ad piece that I thought was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Put it out there, but I put it against a genre of age category and demographics and behavioral and so forth that I thought I was trying to want to target with this. And I came back with a very cold, flat, unresonating response. As this XYZ demographic, as you define, and you are referring to nothing that's interesting for me, and there's no value to this because this is not what I find valuable. I'm sitting there going, wow, punch in the gut for that, Mr. Auto AI. But it made me think, that, yeah, I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It wasn't, not for what I wanted to use it for, not for that category of people. Now you start doing that for your audio ads and your video ads, and you get a great opportunity to have other voices, as if we don't all have enough of our own, to look at what we're doing creatively to see whether or not we're doing what we think the way it's intended. This is all a part of a creative process that isn't just AI generated. This is AI augmentation with creativity. This is using the tool to augment your capabilities, expand your capabilities. I truly believe in the statistics that the article I'm referring to gave about how AI used properly in collaboration creates a huge value increase compared to AI's autonomy in replacement, where it's left to its own wiles and creates hallucinations, variations that are not what you would say relates to what you're trying to make it do. So that's why I think that creative marketing will never really be challenged by AI. In the future, will AI get better? Yes, it's happening now. Is it able to be a threat to creative marketing? Not yet. It has too many off the rail moments as we hear horror stories about AI creating its own language, its own religions and stuff with other AIs and so forth. You're allowed them to run unfettered. How it works against where you even tell it to delete what it does and it doesn't do it. It hides it so you can't see it. It turns paranoid. It's all of those things. It truly is. So it has to always have a filter. As I've often said about AI, about chat bots and everything else, and AI in collaboration with consumer-facing front, like the call one that we talked about in the show, where I made a call center audio, which was really fascinating that it could go off the script so easily and handle the content so easily, depending upon what was fed it. But out of all of these, I have 3 rules for bots, and I've always referred to the 3 rules about: 1, don't act like you're human; 2, don't get in the way of getting to a human; and 3, always make sure that a human is available. I don't want to talk to you, I want to talk to a human. Don't have to go through the bot to do that. By the same token, don't act like you're human, and don't make it where there's nobody to get in front, to get to a human through you. So the rules of bots, we took it off of Asimov, but changed it to a different ruling, is critical to this understanding of how to use AI for creativity. AI can give you wonderful variations visually. If you can describe it in one way and all of a sudden it produces something going, I hadn't thought about that, but that is pretty cool. I like that. And then you move from that point. The idea of AI doing that well in comparison to a human, not happening, not yet. In the future tense, we're all hopefully be around to see what that works out to being. So that's my thought. Why AI will never change creative marketing. So for those of all of you that agree, disagree, I would love to hear your feedback about that. If you're interested in giving me some sort of response, I will include the responses in the show, as also show notes as well. You can reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com, or you can reach me audibly at htm.news/talkback. There's an audio portion there. I always do a weekly question you can answer and so forth. With that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.